All right, so this is another Unity Basics. This will be Unity Basics. This is camera. I'll just call it movement. We're going to see how to move around, to move things around, move the camera around on the screen using the keyboard. So this one is going to actually do a little bit of programming. Not a lot, but a little bit of programming. We'll probably write maybe 10 lines of code for this. And you'll see how easy it is to do this kind of thing. Okay, so we are going to have a 2D project. Remember, make sure we do that. No asset packages, so just a brand new 2D project. We'll create project. And again, I'll be using glitch the game assets. And we're just going to start this whole thing from scratch. So if you watch the first video, you can go through this one again and get a little bit more practice. Okay, so I'm going to just go back and drag in some more. How about a couple? These things are snowdrifts. We'll use them as clouds. A couple more plants, some trees, and how about a fire? And a couple of these things, a couple cliffs. And that should be good enough. We should be able to build a decent scene with this. Okay, so we are in a 2D mode. And what do we have here? We have snowdrifts, we have cliffs. So I'm going to take this one, drag it out. Let's scale it. I'm going to zoom out with my scrolly wheel. And the idea that I want to cover in this one is this rectangle is our camera. And this is what we're going to see. But we're going to build some things outside the scope of the camera and then move the camera around. So I'm just going to start building. We can scroll out as much as we want. You can build as big as you want, but then somehow you need to be able to move the camera so that you can actually see it. So anyways, we'll put some clouds. And these will, I'm going to rotate this 180, give it a slightly different look and kind of scale it back. And then you can do Command D to duplicate. We'll create a copy of it. And I need to zoom in just a little bit. This. Change the rotation on that one. Oops. And I'm doing Command D again to duplicate these little clouds. And there we go. Let's see, what else do we have? We have a little campfire. We're going to stick that here. We want to bring that out to the front, so I'm going to adjust the order and layer just a little bit so we can have our little campfire here. Let's Command D, make a couple of those. Put one over here. I'll put one way over here. Why not? What else do we have? We have some trees. Put that there. Let's scale that thing up a little bit. I'll scale it way up. And let's put it behind this thing. It'll look better. So I think I can just do a negative. Yeah, we'll drop it to a negative. It'll go behind there. Control D that. Oops. And move it over here. And then I'm going to change the rotation on it again to 180. About 180. 180. Maybe not 180. Well, I know what I want to do. So instead of changing the rotation on this one, we're going to change the scale. So this is how much we've scaled it. We've scaled it 5.3 times. I'm going to change it. I'm going to put a negative sign in here. And that'll also flip it around. So that'll give it a slightly different look for that tree as well. These are just little tricks for building scenes. Let's see, what else do we want to do? Let's see, if we hit play, what do we got? Oh, look at that, looks good. Ugly blue though, I hate this blue. So let's go into our main camera and change this color to something a little bit nicer. And you could drop in like a huge background image if you wanted to. I'll just kind of do something like this, make it look really cool. But anyways, this is the idea. So we have this beautiful scene, but we've got all kinds of stuff outside the scope of our camera, right? We've got fire on this side, and we've got stuff over here. And so it would be really cool, like if we could use the keyboard to move our camera around. So that's what we're going to do right now, that's kind of like the whole point of this one, is to be able to move the camera around. And so the way we're going to do that is we are going to create. So the way I did create, I went down here into assets and I right clicked and I said create, and I clicked on C# script, and we'll just call it movement. When you're naming your scripts, make sure you don't use spaces. Unity is pretty tolerant with spaces, but not in class names. So when we're doing scripting, just try to don't use spaces. If I double click on that, it should open up in MonoDevelop. There we go. And we will be able to start coding. Let's see, can I make this thing? There it goes. Make it a little bit bigger. All right, and so just a quick walkthrough of scripting. So for some of you, maybe you've never done programming before. This is a class, and we called it movement, which means that it's going to handle all things movement. And usually you name stuff, and then you can pack as much into a class as you want to, but it's really good to name it a module that's kind of identifies what's going to happen. So this is movement. Every piece of code we write in here is going to be related to movement. By default in Unity, you're going to use these, basically these libraries that help you do things. Don't need to worry about what they are. They always come in. And we have two functions. So functions have kind of three parts to them. This is the type of the function. Void means basically it doesn't return anything, which still might be a buzzword. This is the name of the function. These are the parameters you can pass to it. And then functions start and end with a curly brace. Classes start and end with a curly brace. And that's pretty much how things work. I know coding is new, but that's okay. You'll get through it, and you can ask questions, and you'll understand it a lot more after you get through all these. Okay, so what does a start function do? All the code that we would write inside of here, between this curly brace and this curly brace, happens as soon as this class is created. So in our case, when we start the scene, any code we put in here is going to be run once. In this update function, this is called every frame update. So by default, we're running at 60 frames a second. So any code that we put in here is going to be run 60 times a second. So that's by default what these are. And you can write your own functions, and we'll probably get more into that later. But for right now, we are going to just work inside of this update function. Because since this thing is running 60 times a second, we can check for any kind of keyboard activity 60 times a second. So let's just check that. And the way we're going to do that, we're going to do it with an if statement. So I'll say if input.get key code dot say d. Okay, so I typed this in. Let's explain what's happening. We're saying if, and then in between parentheses, we're saying if this happens to be true. Input.getKey says getting key from the keyboard. Which key are we looking for? Keycode.d. We're looking for the D key. So if the D key is pressed, then we will do something inside of here. So just like all the code in between those two curly braces happen 60 times a second, the code that we put between these two curly braces happen only when the D code is pressed. And when D is pressed, we're going to use WASD. So when D is pressed, we want to move right. So I can say this, / move right. Move right. So when you start a line with / like this, that's a comment. That means it's going to get ignored, but you can put little notes to yourself in there. So we're saying if someone's pressing the D button, we want to move right. We want to move the camera right. But I'll show you how this can be applied to other things too. So we want to move right. So what happens? Let's just hit play. We're just going to practice. If I click on my camera, here's all of the properties of the camera over here on the right. And it has a position and an X. And if I move that X to the right and I'm making it bigger, we see our camera is actually moving to the right. And if I make it smaller, it moves to the left. And so what we want to do is we want to be able to change this value in our code. And that's going to allow us to move the camera. So when somebody presses the D key, we want to increase the position.x. So there's 3 parameters to position, x, y, and z, right? X is left and right, y is up and down, and z is front and back, which in this case kind of doesn't matter as we're doing the way we're structuring these 2D scenes. So right now we just want to say when we push D, we want to move this thing. And when we let go of D, we want it to stop. So I'm going to write some code down, and then we'll explain it. So vector 3 new position equals new vector 3 of transform dot position dot x plus 0.1 f comma transform dot position dot y transform dot position dot z like this. And I'm going to add in an extra return here so that we can see what's going on. Semicolon. And then transform dot position equals new position. Okay, so this is it. We're done. This is going to move our camera to the right. So we didn't write that much code, but let's look at what it does. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to figure out where is the new position of the camera going to be. And that is a vector 3 because it's going to have 3 components to it, right? X, Y, and Z. So the new components, when we say new vector 3, we pass it 3 parameters and they're separated by commas. So this is the first part. This is what we want X to be, which is 0.1 more. I just picked 0.1 out of the sky. We can tweak that if it's too fast or too slow or whatever. But we want to move it 0.1 to the right. And then our Y is going to stay exactly where it is. So this transform means my object. So if we look over here, it's transform.position.x, transform.position.y, transform.position.z. And when we're moving to the right, we want to take whatever happens to be in this transform.position.x and add a little bit to it. And that's what we did. Transform.position.x, add a little bit. And then y and z we want to leave alone. And that's going to calculate where the new position is. And then now we just say transform.position equals new position. This is the new position that we just created. All right. So I'm going to save that. And then when we go back to our scene, we have our movement script. But you might be asking, how does this thing know to move the camera? Let's hit go and see if it works. So according to our script, if we hit the D key, it should be moving to the right. And nothing is happening. And it's because we haven't attached this, we haven't associated this with any object in our scene. If I click on main camera, and then I drag movement over to here, like this, now we've associated this movement script with the camera. So now when I hit play, and I hit D, the camera is starting to move. So down, and it stops when I'm not pressing it, and when I am pressing it, the camera moves. We go all the way over. All right. So now that we have it attached, if you click this little settings, again, I'm over here on the right, click this little settings thing, you can remove component and take the script off. And I can put the script on any object. So if I want to move this, if I want my keys to move this tree, I drag movement script over there. Now when I hit play, the tree moves when I press the key. Right. That's not really what I want, but I just wanted to show you that you could do that. So anything that you apply the script to, it's going to move. And you can put it on 2 things too. So let's say you have it on the camera and on that tree. Then when I move, the tree kind of stays in place because it's moving with us. Because they're both attached to it. Let me go back to this bonsai tree. I'm going to remove this from it. Why not? And now it's just attached to our camera. So we move the camera. How about let's move backwards? So let's move to the left. What I can do is copy and paste and say if I'm going backwards, which this will be an A now, right? So we're going to say WASD. So A is we want it to move left. Then instead of adding 1 to x, or adding 0.1, we're going to subtract. And remember, this number here, I did just kind of pull it out of the air. The bigger this is, the faster you're going to move. That indicates how many units of movement are going to happen 60 times a second. So the bigger that number is, the faster you move. And that's it, right? So instead of adding 1, so we want to move to the right, so we add 1. If we're moving to the left, we're going to subtract 1. And this is to our x. So I'll save that. And let's go. And now I can move left, or right, and go back left. So now you can build whatever you want and have the user, you know, you may, depending on what you're doing, you may have some prompting up here that says, oh, there's more stuff over there, or however you want to do it. And that's how you would go. And remember that the scene that we're in is huge. Like, we can build a huge map of stuff, and then have the user navigate around through it using these keys. And we're always just incrementing by 0.1 or whatever, so it's kind of a smooth motion. But think about how you would do it. Like, if you wanted to all of a sudden, instead of sliding the camera over to the right a little bit, what if you just wanted it to jump and all of a sudden be over here? Like, how would you do that? You could think about that, and how would you use that, and would that be actually useful? I mean, if you had different areas tied to different keys, so press T for this, or U for this, or G to go over here, you could have the camera kind of jumping into these different rectangular spaces, and that might be fairly useful. But again, look at this code. We really didn't write that much, right? It was mostly just, this was all that we wrote, and then we copied and pasted it to here. And as you're writing this, if you're getting any errors, like let's say I forget this curly brace, you're going to get stuff down here in the bottom. See that red error? And it tells you this first thing here on line 27, there's some kind of problem. And so it looks good and everything, but it's saying unexpected symbol end of file. So these are just like normal problems that you'll run into. So usually if you forget a curly brace, then it gets all out of whack. So make sure that for every start curly brace, you have an ending one. I'll put this back and then save it. And then this error should go away. So you can always look down here for any kind of problems if things aren't working. And if I, let me take this off again. If I try to hit play, it's going to say, oh, there's all kinds of problems, and you can look down here. You can also click on this console tab. It'll tell you the same information. And this is going to show you the last one. So if you have like 1,000 things wrong, you'll see all of them in here. But let's fix that. And it's the same kind of thing if you have too many of these curly braces, or if you try to say input with a lowercase I, that's going to turn red. But you're also going to get an error here, and it'll tell you on line 20 there's a problem. Right down here it says line 20 on mine. So if I look at line 20, yeah, there's definitely a problem, and this should be a capital I. So remember, all of this stuff is case sensitive, and you got to have semicolons at the end. Make sure every open curly brace has an ending curly brace. There's curly braces for the class. There, curly braces for each function, and curly braces for each if statement. And then when you're doing little if statements, you're going to open with the parentheses and end with the parentheses. And make sure you have all that. When you have all that in there, everything's going to work good. But a lot of times you'll have the idea will be right, the concept will be right, but you'll be missing like that, like a semicolon. You might have like a comma instead of a semicolon. So you just got to go back and check it out. But for the most part, it's going to give you little red squiggly lines or turn things red, or give you some kind of clue over here. But that's it. So that's our first scripting little example, and it didn't take that long, 20 minutes. So yep, that's scripting basics in Unity.